Hey everybody, this is Perch. All right, let me say on the offset, you, the person who's listening to this right now, you're probably the exception. Okay, so understand as I'm talking about this, I'm probably not talking about you. If you're listening to a comic book channel on YouTube, and specifically my comic book channel, which sits in this weird vortex of, I don't know, what it fence sitter? Is that what they say? Anyway, you you're not you're not who I'm talking about, and I recognize that. I want you to recognize that so we can just kind of move on and get with the program and everything else. Um, so here's my basic premise I'm going to lay out for you. Comic books, with all their audience, you got to picture like the big group of people that's buying comics. Um, Comics has a major problem on its hands, and the problem is there is a hole in its audience, in the people who used to buy comics. Once upon a time, you had a wide collection. Let's say, just to keep the numbers simple, an average comic would be 100,000 to 200,000 copies sold, and this was going to a retailer or a grocery store or whatever else. And keep in mind, grocery stores had returnability, so you sold in 100,000, but maybe 40 of them are coming back, and so on. But just again, for the sake of argument, it's close enough. 100 to 200,000 people are buying a particular comic title every month. Fast forward to today, the average numbers across the big two and some of the independents are around 40 to 50,000 for a modestly selling title. If you're Marvel and it's Moon Knight, you're pretty happy with 50,000 copies. If it's Spider-Man, you're not happy, but that's kind of what you're making. So anyway, that's kind of the world you're living in, right? You've got your comic audience that was once bigger and now it's a lot smaller. Of that audience that is now smaller, you have let's say, I don't know, a certain percentage of the comic audience that, let's call it 25%. That may be a little high, but 25% of people are not just lapsed comic buyers, they're angry comic buyers. These are people who actually were going to stores, and for whatever reason, whether it was situational or they actually liked the characters or who knows, they were putting down $20 to $50 a month in comics 10 years ago, 20 years ago, certainly 10 years ago. And now they're not. This is a hole in your market. Now, there's a bunch of different people who lapse from comic. Maybe you just get tired of collecting and you stop. That's been true since the 70s. You got people who would come into comics and then they would just, for whatever reason, leave. Then you have people who would age out. If you listen to or if you read articles on Comics Beat, you would basically come to a conclusion that once you hit 50, you're about to die any second and you stop buying comics. By the way, I got, a buddy recently said, hey, that you ought to not crap on Comics Beat, and a lot of creators really like, Heidi and those people over there. That's fine. I'm sure they're all wonderful people, but the problem is the data, the DATA data that they put out is garbage. And as a data guy, I'm sorry, I'm not going to say it's all well and good, because the data that goes out is straight up bullshit. If I was telling you like, hey, there's a new diet, by the way, that's popular in the US that you may have heard about. It's the all sugar diet, where you just eat things that are really high in sugar. That's stupid. If you do that, you're going to die. Like, that's a dumb idea. But people are like, well, I don't know, as an expert on the internet said it's true. Okay, but that person's a fucking idiot. Let's stop. You're going to kill yourself. That's a little bit like what when the Comics Beat puts out articles, particularly around numbers. I'm sorry if you're in the industry and you're a comic creator and you've gone out to dinner with Heidi or one of the staff. I'm sure she's lovely. She has a long experience in comics, but then the numbers, the data is bullshit. Like, it's hardcore bullshit. If you believe it, I'm sorry, but you're not believing real intelligence. You could take my word for it or not, but you can compare it against Penguin Random House numbers. You can compare it against anything you want. It's not true. If you're banking kind of your career on that, I beg you, please stop. But forget about all that. You had a comic audience, and a percentage of the comic audience is now gone. So today, I would estimate 25% of the comic audience has left. And where they've gone to is YouTube or social media or whatever. Some of them are hardcore, some of them are lapsed. I talk to comic creators, and they will say, "Yeah, it's an insignificant number." No, it's actually it's like 20 to 25% of the audience is now gone. The challenge is this, and here's where a lot of you are going to disagree with what I have to say. You're not winning if you're Marvel. You're not winning back that 20%. I'm sorry, you're not. If you did a comic event called Spider-Man gets remarried to Mary Jane, Iceman says he woke up and is no longer gay and starts boning chicks, and Miss Marvel is murdered. And that's like the worst event title of all time, but that's the event title. You know, Carol Danvers goes back to wearing her thong costume and just fucks Steve Rogers over and over and over. This is a really long event title. But even if you put out an event like that, you're not winning back that 20 to 25%. At the very least, you're not winning them back at the volumes they were at in 2005, 2010. The audience that you had during Civil War, that audience isn't coming back to Marvel. They may say they would. They may talk about in videos. They may argue to the end of it, like, if you just made the characters less gay, if you just made Ghost Rider more badass, if you just did this and that, I would start buying comics again. I don't believe you. I don't think you're coming back to Marvel. By the way, I don't need to be proven wrong or right on this. That's my opinion. I don't think they're coming back. So if you're the publisher, you have a problem on your hands. 20% of your audience is gone. Yes, they're over on YouTube complaining about you, but to be fair, that's not your problem. I mean, you don't want people complaining about you. Bad press is not a good thing, but it's not really something you can solve. You're not gonna, no matter what you do with your comics, you're not gonna win those people back. They've been burnt. I think we have to start looking at comics that way of the audience that got isolated from you, and we can debate till the end of time. Might be a good philosophical debate, but we can debate that. They're gone. Can you win them back? Can you not? Why are they gone? What led to the problem? That's an interesting conversation, and it's probably a good one to have, so you don't isolate fans and buyers in the future. But in 2026, sorry, I got ahead of myself. Normally, I'm like a year behind. In 2025, that group is no longer with you. They've moved on. In many cases, they moved on to a new product, and the new product is making fun of and shitting on comics, and or indies. And by the way, I'm not saying this with malice. If you're somebody who's really into crowdfunding, you regularly go on live streams, and you don't like Marvel, I as I've said, been very consistent about this for 3 years, 6 years, however many years. Find your bliss, man. Find what makes you happy. You're the buyer. You're the one with the money. Go where you're happy. You are under no obligation to buy comics, to support Marvel, to support DC, to support the comic industry. You can do what you want to do. But I think we have to recognize that audience is a lost audience. They are into other things now. Those other things may be comics in a different form, indie comics. It may be YouTube. It may be just dunking and crapping on pop culture and media. I whatever it is, I think it is impossible, not 100% impossible, but mostly impossible to win those guys back. If you're Marvel, the challenge is in order to win that entire audience back. Let's say that your new Marvel Comics lineup has Mark Miller and he's the head editor, and we've got Rob Liefeld in there, and we have I don't know, your usual collection. Ethan Van Sciver's in charge of the X-Men, whatever it happens to be. Like, you've put kind of a group that is designed to appeal to the people who did disenfranchised by comics. You could do that, but I don't and man, this is absolutely going to get live streamed and sniped because I'm using the names. I shouldn't do that. By the way, you can't say don't Voldemort. What's the term? Don't Voldemort the name. Don't refer to us by without referring to a name. The reason why so many people do that is because you guys then take the videos and you live stream against them and you shit on people. That's why they don't mention your name because they don't want that shit. That's why they do it. Like I'm sorry, but if you're gonna you can't snipe somebody's video or commentary and then shit on them for not mentioning your name like that. Like you get one or the other. You don't get both. Anyway, my point here is you could go hardcore into the YouTube audience and you're not going to get a bigger audience than you have now. And by the way, it's not an insult. It's just you're not going to get a bigger audience than you have at the moment. Yeah, at best, I think you're less than net neutral. I don't know. You'll have some people are going to buy the comics, whether they're whoever's doing them. You got the person collecting Spider-Man, and you could put a AI robot in charge of Spider-Man. They're still going to buy it. You got. By the way, every time I put in to Chat GPT, give me a good Spider-Man pitch. Every single time, the pitch is Spider-Man marries Mary Jane again. 100% of the time. Chat GPT knows what's up. Anyway, you could do that, but you haven't really changed your fate. So the point I'm saying here is, if you're Marvel, if you're DC, and you're looking at your comic buying audience, you have a hole in it. You have and I'm estimating a 20% gap of people who just noped out and stopped buying. I'm using that 20% number because if I look historically at the sales trends, some people have said, like 90% of Marvel's fans have disappeared. Yeah, but the sales don't prove that. You've exaggerated your power. If you look at the sales, you see a very consistent over what's called a medium span of time. You see a 20 to 25% drop that's occurred in the last 5 to 10 years. And that drop of audience you need to fill to get back up to where you were and grow. So where are you going to get that audience? Well, I'll tell you where you're not going to get them, is what I'm saying. You're not going to reach out to the audience that now is, appeals to YouTube and get them pulled back into your lineup. It's not going to work. There's what's a guy, there's somebody who comments on a lot of my videos, and I don't know why, because I get the feeling he disagrees with me the majority of the time. He's into manga now and Berserk and stuff like that. Oh, please help me out. You put a comment on every one of my videos, and I'm clearly having an old man moment just forgetting your name at the moment, but I see you there. Crap. I'm pissed at myself now for not remembering. Anyway, this guy is like, yeah, I just read manga now. Do you think you're going to win him back? Like, how would you win him back? Like, let's say you got John Byrne to come in and do She-Hulk, and he did it as a super cheesecake pinup. You captured perfectly the vibes of She-Hulk from the 80s. Let's say Jim Lee retires from DC, you hire him over and he does a X-Men run of 12 issues. It's a little bit of a different story because he's a superstar artist. It would appeal to a lot of different people, but you're not going to get the guy who was spending $50 a month on Marvel Comics back in 2005. No, I don't think there's a way in your lineup that you can get that person back spending $50 a month again. I think that audience is lost to you. I may be wrong. It's my opinion. You could say, no, if you did X, Y, and Z, you'd get there. But I don't think so. A lot of those people are spending that money because they were invested in the continuity and they're invested in the characters, and you divorced them from the characters. So you would have to basically do some very bizarre mea culpa where you go, hey, everything that happened the last 15 years was a dream, and now we're moving on from there. Even there, I think you burnt people. I'm taking some of these people at their word. They will say in my comments and other places, like, I'm never buying Marvel again. Okay, you said it, so I'm gonna take you at your word. You're not coming back. So where does this leave Marvel and to some extent DC? But we'll mainly focus on Marvel. That means you now have a hole in your business plan that you need to go fill. So how are you going to fill it? And this is a real conundrum because, I think we've been seeing Marvel make attempts. to fill it with the Webtoon audience, to fill it with the Twitter audience, and then Twitter became bad, and now we're filling it with the Blue Sky audience and the Instagram audience. They've been trying different things, but unless I don't know if they're ready to admit it yet, but that's not really working. You can't just go out and pull another audience in. The MCU is not helping you to pull in fans of those movies. If by the way, if as much as people crap on, say, the Thunderbolts movie, if everyone who went to see the Thunderbolts movie bought a Marvel comic, my God, it would be a renaissance. It would be the best selling comic ever. But those people aren't coming, so you're the places where you've been going to try and fill this hole are not working. So where do you go? And it's a complicated question. Where do you go? If you're asking me, I think the only logical answer is that you've got to go for the kids. You've got to go for kids and early teens. You got to get them back excited about these books again, where, X-Men and the Avengers and Spider-Man are must reads. And unfortunately, and I think this is an area that, again, I'll say this and be like, yeah, but don't you think, the writers and the editors should get to do what they want? I mean, honestly, in a corporate comic book, no. Unless what they want happens to intersect with what's a top selling comic, then no. This is a corporation. Your goal is to make money. Your goal is to build audience. Your goal is to get sales. Your goal is to sell those fucking comics in the comic shop. That's what you got to do. So the way you get that audience is you got to make it must read. You got to make every comic invoke cliffhangers and tension, so you get people clamoring to come back a month later. You do have an audience that's been bred on streaming devices and instant gratification of shows. So you got to find a way to kind of hook people where 30 days later you come back with more money. You're going to have to find, and frankly, that younger audience, that kids and teen audience, they're not interested in social issues. They're not interested in morality lessons. They're getting too many of those from their parents and from school. They're interested in superhero action. They're interested in, pretty straightforward A to B kind of stories. I say this with some certainty because if you look at the manga that's been successful, whether it's One Punch Man or Jujutsu Kaisen or Demon Slayer or books like that, they're pretty basic. There's a bad thing. There's a good guy. Good guy kill bad thing. Next adventure. And that's really what it is. And so if you want to find that new audience, I think, first of all, I think you have to get your head around the fact that you're going for a new audience. You're not going to be able to pull back the old audience. Now, by the way, if you put out great comics, enough time goes by, yeah, some of that old audience will wander back and enjoy what you've done. And that's just, consider that a bonus. But you can't play to that audience that got so pissed off at you that the main source of their entertainment now is going onto YouTube and hearing people shit on comics. Those people aren't coming back. You're going to have to put out some really good books. You're going to have to appeal to a younger audience. The younger audience is going to want superhero books. They're going to want pretty basic, straightforward, action stories. And they're going to want some cliffhangers. They're going to want some reasons to come back. They're going to want some level of excitement of, hey, I can't wait for next month and we'll see how this works out. You're going to need to build that brand. But I think that to me, that is your audience. Your other option is you go at Webtoon and you go at kind of digital, the audience that's been built up over there. But the problem there is the majority of that audience is used to free. And so now you're having to compete against free with, frankly, an overpriced product in the market. So I think that's a tougher go. If I'm you comic publishers, I am creating core stories. I'm trying to create very reliable, very trusted comics with characters that we know. I think Bleeding Cool, Rich very insultingly calls it kind of meat and potatoes comics. He says that with so much dripping disdain that I still wonder, like, if you're a comic creator and you're talking to this guy, I don't know why you're doing that, but whatever. That guy has immense disdain for your business. Be that as it may. Um, the problem is you got to fill the hole. You got to, first of all, you have to admit there is a hole. And that one step seems to elude a lot of people at the publishers where they don't want to admit that hole exists. They want to minimize, like, the people on the internet, the YouTube, that's just a bunch of, bitching, complaining people. Like, they don't even matter. They're insignificant. Well, to some extent, that's true. They're insignificant in the standpoint of they're not coming back to your comics, so they're not going to pay your rent or pay your dollars or pay your salary. So, yeah, you probably ought to figure out how to get money elsewhere because those guys aren't coming back. So, you have that you have that to deal with, but you have to admit there's a problem. And then you have to be really thoughtful about, okay, how are you going to go solve that problem? And the way you got to solve it, I think, is you've got to go at that audience that's, being pulled on a regular basis by manga, which features fairly straightforward stories, fairly basic protagonists and antagonists, character-driven moments, a sense of danger, a sense of cliffhanger, or big reveal. That's what you're competing against. So you got to tune your comics that way, and then I think you will start to appeal to that audience. And then the weird thing is there are creators out there who really dislike the YouTube community. Well, you're not in a position at the moment to give them the finger and say, fuck it, I don't need you. You probably want to be there, but you're not there. So what you should do is put the necessary things in place, go get that new audience. That new audience, I think the only answer there is a new audience is younger readers. Catch them, get them addicted and hooked on comics, and do so using very straightforward storytelling approaches. I think if you do that, you will win. But beyond that, I ask you, in the comments below, what are these other audiences? And I want you to be really honest with yourself, because there are some of you right now, I'm sure, who are like, no, I watch kind of these videos, but I would go back to comics. So one of two things. Either one, you're the exception that proves the rule. You're not the majority. Or two, you say that, but you don't mean it. Unless you want, like, it's like the only way I'm going to be happy in comics is Chuck Dixon is writing Captain America, and we got, I don't know, the artist of Pitt is going to be doing the art. Or, I don't know. I'm not up to speed on where everybody sits, but Dale Keown's on the art. Chuck Dixon is on the story. It's Captain America. That's what we're going to do. And but that's a small solution to your problem. The two of those guys may create a banger run of Captain America. I don't know. The bigger problem is that you have a core of your audience that is no longer interested in you as a product. And so therefore, you've got to go find another one. And if you're truly a petty, vindictive person and you want to minimize that group, you want to make them less important. Well, one really easy way to do that, make them irrelevant where the sales are concerned. But that means you're going to have to go get another audience. So who is that other audience? Let me know in the comments below, and thanks for listening.